2026 podría ser un año clave para la inteligencia artificial. Por eso, en el vídeo de hoy vamos a repasar todas las declaraciones de los principales CEOs del sector y voy a mostraros todo lo que han dicho sobre el futuro de la inteligencia artificial en el próximo año, para que tengáis una idea clara de lo que se viene. Lo primero que vamos a ver es lo que dice Dario Amodei. Dario Amodei es investigador y emprendedor en el campo de la inteligencia artificial, conocido sobre todo por ser uno de los cofundadores de Anthropic, la empresa responsable de Claude AI. Antes de eso fue vicepresidente de investigación en OpenAI, donde tuvo un papel fundamental en el desarrollo de GPT-2 y GPT-3. Una de las cosas que comenta Dario Amodei sobre la programación en 2026 es que la inteligencia artificial podría estar al nivel de los mejores programadores humanos hacia finales de 2026, y que ya para finales de 2025 alcanzará un nivel realmente avanzado.
For winter break, as I was looking at where things were scheduled to scale within Anthropic and also what was happening outside Anthropic, I looked at it and I said, for coding, we're going to see very serious things by the end of 2025, and by the end of 2026, it might be, everything, close to the level of the best humans. And I think of all the things that I'm good at, right? I think of all the times when I wrote code, and I think of it as like this intellectual activity, and boy, am I smart that I can do this, and it's like a part of my identity that I'm like, good at this, and I get mad when others are better than I am. And then I'm like, oh my God, there are going to be these systems that, and even as the one who's building this, even as one of the ones who benefits most from it, there's still something a bit threatening about it.
Yeah.
I just think we need to acknowledge that. Like it's wrong not to tell people that is coming or to try to sugarcoat it.
Dario Amodei también señala que es probable que en 2026 o 2027 lleguemos a la AGI. Por supuesto, no es algo garantizado, pero asegura que se trata de un avance que se está acercando rápidamente y que conviene tener muy presente.
So 2026, 2027 is when you effectively get to AGI across the board. And it's the threshold moment. Whoever's ahead then is ahead forever. Is that what you're saying?
Potentially. I mean, we don't know these things, but there's a risk of this.
That's happening at a particularly uncertain time geopolitically, but we'll get to that.
I've heard those same years, floated as. No, I'm aware of how frightening this is.
De hecho, Dario Amodei ha hablado más en profundidad sobre lo que podríamos esperar en 2026 y 2027 en cuanto a capacidades. En esta entrevista con Lex Fridman aclara que todo esto podría cambiar, ya que el campo de la inteligencia artificial está en constante evolución, pero aún así comparte más detalles sobre lo que podría estar por venir.
If I say 2026 or 2027, there will be like a zillion people on Twitter who will be like, AI CEO said 2026, 2020, and it'll be repeated for the next 2 years that this is definitely when I think it's going to happen. So whoever's exporting these clips will crop out the thing I just said and only say the thing I'm about to say. But I'll just say it anyway.
Have fun with it.
So if you extrapolate the curves that we've had so far, right? If you say, well, I don't know, we're starting to get to PhD level, and last year we were at undergraduate level, and the year before we were at the level of a high school student. Again, you can quibble with at what tasks and for what. We're still missing modalities, but those are being added. Computer use was added, image was added, image generation has been added. If you just kind of and this is totally unscientific, but if you just kind of eyeball the rate at which these capabilities are increasing, it does make you think that we'll get there by 2026 or 2027.
Dario Amodei también habló de todo esto en más detalle en su publicación del blog Machines of Loving Grace. Una de las frases más citadas fue: el tiempo apremia y debemos acelerar nuestras acciones para estar a la altura del rápido avance de la inteligencia artificial. Y añadió que posiblemente para 2026 o 2027, y como muy tarde 2030, las capacidades de los sistemas de IA podrían compararse con la aparición, en el escenario global, de un nuevo estado poblado por personas extremadamente inteligentes. La parte que más ha dado que hablar fue su metáfora de un país de genios dentro de un centro de datos, lo cual tendría consecuencias económicas, sociales y de seguridad muy importantes. Así que una vez más, 2026 y 2027 se perfilan como años clave para el desarrollo de la IA. Ahora bien, conviene añadir algo de contexto. Hay que tener en cuenta que estas empresas de IA están en una búsqueda constante de financiación, por lo que también les interesa transmitir que esta tecnología no para de mejorar. Una parte de mí cree que muchas de estas predicciones para el año que viene también responden a esa necesidad de atraer inversores inversión. Pero al mismo tiempo no creo que todo sea simple marketing. También da la impresión de que realmente están observando de cerca el potencial de la tecnología actual y proyectando hacia dónde puede ir. Están diciendo básicamente, sabemos a dónde apunta todo esto. Si nos fijamos ahora en Elon Musk, hablamos de alguien que fundó OpenAI y que recientemente ha creado su propia empresa de inteligencia artificial que está avanzando a un ritmo impresionante. Además, lidera Tesla, una compañía que está a la vanguardia en tecnología de conducción autónoma basada en IA. Lleva años hablando sobre inteligencia artificial y una de sus declaraciones más recientes hizo una predicción en la que afirmaba que es bastante probable que alcancemos la AGI en 2026.
Grok's coming to Tesla, so you'll be able to access Grok through your Tesla, and you'll just be able to ask it to do whatever you want. You could ask your car to go pick up a friend or anything. You can think of it, the car will be able to do it. Yeah, you'll be able to ask your Tesla to go pick up groceries, pretty much anything. Optimus is really going to be next level. You'll be able to skin Optimus pretty much with anything. So people on the internet have asked me to make catgirls real, and actually you can make catgirls real if you have a robot. You have a robot catgirl. Yeah, Optimus will be able to pick up the kids from school, and Optimus will be able to be school if you want. Be able to teach kids anything. Yeah, and it'll support any language too. I think AGI will be next year. Probably. It's not next year, let's say 2026 at the latest for AGI. At the latest. I hope it's nice to us. So, one defines AGI as smarter than any human. I think we're less than 24 months away from that. Yeah, please be nice to us, AGI. Humanoid robots will usher in a level of abundance that was hard to imagine. There will be no shortage of goods and services.
Elon Musk también habló más a fondo sobre los robots Tesla, conocidos como Tesla Bots, y comentó que la empresa planea fabricar unos 10.000 este mismo año. Según él, empezarán a trabajar en las fábricas de Tesla antes de que acabe el año, y los datos recogidos por estos robots se utilizarán para desarrollar la segunda versión, cuyo lanzamiento está previsto para 2026. Así que probablemente en 2026 veremos una versión del Tesla Bot que podría empezar a desplegarse a gran escala. Elon Musk también profundizó más sobre la AGI y básicamente afirmó que sucederá en los próximos 1 o 2 años, y que será mucho más inteligente que cualquier forma de inteligencia humana.
When things are changing rapidly, the ability to predict the future, I think, becomes a lot harder because the rate of change is so great. But I think some things are fairly obvious to predict, which is that we'll have AI or AGI that's at a level that it can really do almost any cognitive, I think really not almost, really any cognitive task. It's just a question of when. One could debate, is it, smarter than any human at the end of next year, or is it 2 years or 3 years? But it's not more than 5 years, that's for sure. I think it's probably end of next year before AI can do better than any individual human can do. But it's a much higher bar to say, well, is it smarter than human intelligence collectively? But if the rate of change continues, that's why I think probably 2029 or maybe 2030 is where digital intelligence will probably exceed all human intelligence combined.
Por supuesto, este vídeo no estaría completo sin hablar de Sam Altman. Altman ha hecho varias predicciones preciosas en el pasado, y creo que sus pronósticos son, sin duda, los más acertados. No lo digo solo porque sea el CEO de OpenAI, sino porque ya hizo predicciones sobre ChatGPT en una época en la que no existía una IA capaz de hacer lo que él decía. Recuerdo que en 2016 o 2020 hablaba de que la inteligencia artificial pronto sería como un asistente virtual capaz de escribir ensayos, y es impresionante lo certeras que fueron esas predicciones para el futuro que estamos viviendo ahora. En septiembre de 2024, Sam Altman hizo predicciones sobre los próximos 18 meses, lo que incluye el año 2026. Dijo que no ocurrirá todo de golpe, pero pronto seremos capaces de trabajar con una inteligencia artificial que nos ayudará a lograr más de lo que jamás podríamos sin ella. Eventualmente tendremos una IA que funcionará como un equipo personal compuesto por expertos virtuales en distintas áreas, trabajando juntos para crear casi cualquier cosa que podamos imaginar. Además, nuestros hijos tendrán tutores virtuales que podrán ofrecerles una enseñanza personalizada en cualquier materia. día, en cualquier idioma y a la velocidad que necesiten. Podemos imaginar ideas similares para mejorar la atención sanitaria, la capacidad de crear cualquier tipo de software que alguien pueda imaginar y mucho más. Estas son sus predicciones para los próximos 18 meses, y creo que son bastante acertadas. De hecho, muchas de ellas ya están sucediendo hoy en día. Ahora, por supuesto, llega el turno de Demis Hassabis. Es un investigador británico en inteligencia artificial, neurocientífico, emprendedor y galardonado en el mundo de los videojuegos. Es más conocido por ser el cofundador y CEO de Google DeepMind, uno de los laboratorios de investigación en IA más importantes, responsable de los avances impresionantes de AlphaGo y AlphaFold, que son realmente extraordinarios. DeepMind ha comentado que para 2026 su objetivo es combinar eventualmente los modelos de IA Gemini y VIA. La razón por la que están intentando hacer esto es para crear modelos que realmente comprendan el mundo físico, lo que llaman modelos de comprensión del mundo. Gemini fue diseñado desde el principio para ser multimodal, apoyando la visión de Google de un asistente digital universal que puede ayudar en contextos del mundo real. Esto va en una línea con la tendencia más amplia de la industria hacia modelos omnicanal que manejan tipos de contenido multimedia como texto, imágenes, audio y vídeo. Hassabis sugirió que VIA aprende sobre el mundo analizando grandes cantidades de vídeos de YouTube, y Google ha reconocido que sus modelos podrían ser entrenados con contenido de YouTube bajo los términos de servicios actualizados. En resumen, parece que para finales de 2025 y 2026 podríamos estar viendo un modelo multimodal omnicanal que realmente entienda el mundo físico. En cuanto a sus predicciones sobre la AGI y el futuro, Demis Hassabis ha afirmado que es bastante probable que esté a solo 3 o 5 años de distancia.
We've been working on this for more than 20 plus years. We've sort of had a consistent view about AGI being a system that's capable of exhibiting all the cognitive capabilities humans can. And I think we're getting, closer and closer, but I think we're still probably a handful of years away.
Okay, and so what is it going to take to get there?
So the models today are pretty capable. Of course, we've all interacted with the language models, and now they're becoming multimodal. I think there are still some missing attributes, things like reasoning, hierarchical planning, long-term memory. There's quite a few capabilities that the current systems, I would say, don't have. They're also not consistent across the board. They're very, very strong in some things, but they're still surprisingly weak and flawed in other areas. So you'd want an AGI to have pretty consistent, robust behavior across the board, all the cognitive tasks. And I think one thing that's clearly missing, and I always had as a benchmark for AGI, was the ability for these systems to invent their own hypotheses or conjectures about science, not just prove existing ones. So of course that's extremely useful already to prove an existing maths conjecture or something like that, or play a game of Go to a world champion level. But could a system invent Go? Could it come up with a new Riemann hypothesis? Or could it come up with relativity back in the days that Einstein did it with the information that he had? And I think today's systems are still pretty far away from having that kind of creative, inventive capability.
Okay, so a couple years away till we hit AGI.
I think, I would say probably like 3 to 5 years away.
Como podéis ver, las predicciones de Demis son algo más conservadoras, y como mencioné antes, no creo que sea porque su empresa esté detrás. No hay ningún incentivo para que diga que la AGI llegará el próximo año, pero en general es realmente interesante ver las diferentes perspectivas. De hecho, él mismo habló sobre el año 2026 en un escenario junto a Dario Amodei, y fue un intercambio bastante interesante entre ambos sobre lo que podría suceder el próximo año y en los años siguientes.
When we're at the point where we have a model, an AI model that can do everything a human can do, at the level of a Nobel laureate, like the one sitting next to me, across many fields, can do anything a human can do remotely, can do tasks that take, minutes, hours, days, months. My guess is that we'll get that in 2026 or 2027.
Demis, do you agree with that? I think you thought this was a bit further away.
We don't disagree about too much. I think the timelines are a little bit longer. The way I would define AGI is a system that can exhibit all the cognitive capabilities humans can. And that's important because the human mind is the only example maybe that we know of in the universe that is a general intelligence. Of course, how to test that is the big question. The one I'm really looking for and why I think it's a little bit further out, maybe 50% chance of in 5 years' time, so maybe by the end of the decade, I think we don't have systems yet that could have invented general relativity when Einstein did with the information that he had available at the time. Or another example I give is, can you invent a game like Go, not just play a great move like Move 37 or build AlphaGo that can beat the world champion? Could you actually invent a game that's as beautiful aesthetically and so on as Go is? So I think it's going to take a little bit longer to get that kind of capability.
Ahora hablamos de Mark Zuckerberg, el emprendedor y programador estadounidense conocido por ser el cofundador y presidente de Facebook, que ahora se llama Meta, una de las mayores empresas tecnológicas del mundo. Recientemente ha hablado sobre algunas de las cosas que espera que sucedan en 2026. De hecho, su objetivo es que la inteligencia artificial realice la mitad de la programación de Meta para 2026. En YamaCon se sentó a charlar con Satya Nadella sobre el futuro de la inteligencia artificial y la programación.
But the big one that we're focused on is building an AI and a machine learning engineer to advance the llama development itself, right? Because I mean, our bet is sort of that in the next year, probably, I don't know, maybe half the development is going to be done by AI as opposed to people, and then that will just kind of increase from there.
I mean, to me, the SWE agent is the sort of the first attempt. So the question for us is, in the next year, can we get let's take a kernel optimization, right? Will we get to sort of something like that happens? I think it's more likely. Whether it comes up with a novel model architecture change, probably not. So the question is, which task?
Yeah, no, optimization, security improvements, that type of stuff, I think seems like it's pretty high opportunity.
And the other thing for us is, to your point, our core business, in fact, Bill started the company as a tools company. And so to us, the interesting thing I think about now is maybe the way we should reconceptualize our tools and infrastructure, quite frankly, are the tools and the infrastructure for the agents to use. Because even the SWE agent needs a bunch of tools. And what shape should they be? What should their infrastructure, what should their sandboxes be? So a lot of what we're going to do is essentially evolve even what is the GitHub repo construct even look for the SWE agent.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting concept. And I mean, I tend to think that like every engineer is effectively going to end up being more of like a tech lead in the future that has sort of their own little army of engineering agents that they work with. But yeah.
Ahora, por supuesto, es el momento de hablar de Eric Schmidt, el tecnólogo, emprendedor y filántropo estadounidense, conocido por haber sido CEO de Google desde 2001 hasta 2011. Este hombre jugó un papel clave en la transformación de Google, impulsando la innovación en la búsqueda, la computación en la nube y la inteligencia artificial. Recientemente hizo varias declaraciones sobre lo que cree que ocurrirá el próximo año en la IA. Escuchémoslo.
We believe, as an industry, that in the next 1 year, the vast majority of programmers will be replaced by AI programmers. We also believe that within 1 year, you will have graduate level mathematicians that are at the tippy top of graduate math programs. So that's 1 year, okay? What happens in 2 years? Well, I've just told you about reasoning, and I've told you about programming, and I've told you about math. Programming plus math are the basis of sort of our whole digital world. So the evidence and the claims from the research groups in OpenAI and Anthropic and so forth is that they're now somewhere around 10 or 20% of the code that they're developing in their research programs is being generated by the computer. That's called recursive self-improvement is the technical term. So what happens when this thing starts to scale? Well, a lot. One way to say this is that within 3 to 5 years, we'll have what is called general intelligence, AGI, which can be defined as a system that is as smart as the smartest mathematician, physicist, artist, writer, thinker, politician. I call this, by the way, the San Francisco consensus, because everyone who believes this is in San Francisco. It may be the water. What happens when every single one of us has the equivalent of the smartest human on every problem in our pocket? But the reason I want to make the point here is that in the next year or two, this foundation is being locked in, and we're not going to stop it. It gets much more interesting after that. Because remember, the computers are now doing self-improvement. They're learning how to plan, and they don't have to listen to us anymore. We call that superintelligence, or ASI, artificial superintelligence. And this is the theory that there will be computers that are smarter than the sum of humans. The San Francisco consensus is this occurs within 6 years. just based on scaling. This path is not understood in our society. There's no language for what happens with the arrival of this. That's why it's underhyped. People do not understand what happens when you have intelligence at this level, which is largely free.
Ahora, por supuesto, tenemos que hablar de Jensen Huang, el empresario y ingeniero eléctrico estadounidense de origen taiwanés, cofundador, presidente y CEO de Nvidia, la mayor empresa de semiconductores del mundo. Este hombre habló sobre algo que, con suerte, llegará al 100% en 2026, siempre que no haya retrasos. Aquí es donde el CEO de Nvidia, Jensen Huang, habla sobre Nvidia Rubin, la próxima plataforma de IA de Nvidia. Esta plataforma incluye una nueva GPU llamada Reuben y una CPU personalizada llamada Vera, diseñadas para aplicaciones avanzadas de IA. El nombre proviene de Travis Baron Rubin y su lanzamiento está previsto para la segunda mitad de 2026. Se espera que Reuben ofrezca mejoras significativas en el rendimiento respecto a los chips Blackwell anteriores de Nvidia, especialmente en cuanto a entrenamiento de inferencia de IA. El siguiente es Aidan Gómez, un científico informático y emprendedor británico-canadiense conocido por su trabajo pionero en IA, especialmente en procesamiento del lenguaje natural. De hecho, coescribió el influyente artículo de investigación de 2017 Attention is All You Need, que introdujo la arquitectura Transformer, base de modelos generativos de IA como ChatGPT. En su predicción cree que en 2026 veremos modelos que ya no serán sin estado, sino que aprenderán activamente. Una de las frustraciones actuales con estos modelos es que su corte de conocimiento a menudo está limitado a 2023 o incluso a principios de 2024. Sin embargo, piensa que esto cambiará el próximo año.
There's this second thing which I think it'll come this year or next, which is continual learning. Or learning from experience. The status quo is that we build models, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars building them, and then they're frozen. And yeah, they're out there talking to people, doing things on behalf of people, but they're not learning, they're just static, and everyone talks to the same version. There will be breakthroughs coming soon, which unlock the ability to learn from experience. And you can imagine working with this model and asking it to do something, and it fails. It's fine, interns fail. Failure is not a bad thing. But the thing about humans is that when you teach them how to do it properly, when you correct them, they remember that forever. They'll never make that same mistake again. And so they grow with you over time. That's what experience is. So giving that to the underlying technology will unlock dramatic lifts in terms of value for the enterprise. So we're excited to push that forward.
Luego, por supuesto, tenemos a Imad Mostake, el matemático británico bangladesí, ejecutivo de negocios y exgerente de un fondo de cobertura, conocido por ser el fundador y ex CEO de Stability AI, la empresa detrás del popular generador de imágenes de IA de código abierto, Stable Diffusion. Él también hace algunas predicciones interesantes sobre el próximo año.
You could definitely run DeepSeek R1 on solar power panels. And if we look at the direction this is going, because it's still not optimized, next year, you should be able to get an O1 level model on your smartphone that pulls at most 20 watts of electricity, and it's less than $1 per watt of solar power. And this doesn't make sense if you look at what these models are capable of and we think about the cost of intellectual labor.
Well, it makes sense when you think about how much energy your brain pulls.
It's 20 watts.
And so we have a huge efficiency curve to ride to get there.
And I think the thing is, by next year, you will have these O1 level models on 20 watts, which is our human brain level. And these are PhD level in so many areas. And that doesn't compute because we've had these discussions of Microsoft is bringing back 3 Mile Island as a nuclear power reactor, Dyson spheres. Energy is going to use everything, 60 gigawatts of electricity is coming on for data centers in the US, I think, over the next year or so. Yet, when we get down to the actual numbers for a given unit of intelligence, it's a few watts, it's a few pennies. Before that, it would take entire teams using how many watts of energy in their brain, in their infrastructure. And we're not ready for that.
Ahora echemos un vistazo a lo que dice Yan LeCun. La razón por la que lo incluyo es porque LeCun es un científico de IA con logros impresionantes, pero tiene una opinión diferente a la mayoría de la industria de la IA. De hecho, afirma que las capacidades avanzadas de la IA no llegarán el próximo año y que la AGI no estará disponible al menos en los próximos 3 a 5 años. Es realmente interesante porque es una postura bastante controvertida, pero está firme en su opinión, y es bueno contar con diferentes perspectivas.
So how long is it going to take? So I seek to have possibly a system that, at least to most people, feels like it has the same level of intelligence as humans. If all of the plans all of the things that we are imagining will work, okay, so those JEPA architectures and, some other ideas that we're playing with succeed, I don't see this happening in less than 5 or 6 years, okay? But now, is it going to happen in 5 or 6 years? And I think there's a distribution with a tail that's very long, and the history of AI is that people just keep underestimating how hard it is. I'm probably making the same mistake right now. When I say 5, 6 years, this is if, we don't run into a major obstacle that we didn't foresee, if all the things that we're planning to try out actually work, if things can scale, if computers, accelerate and all that stuff. There's a lot of things, a lot of planets that need to line up for this to happen. So that's the best case, right? It's not going to happen next year. Like you might have heard from some other folks.
Sam Altman, yeah, right, yeah.
Sam Altman, Elon Musk, various people, or Dario Amodei. It's going to happen within the next 2 years or something. No.
Dicho esto, me gustaría saber qué opináis vosotros, si creéis que todo esto va a ocurrir el próximo año o no. Yo creo que sin duda será muy interesante, seguro que habrá un montón de avances en IA. Dicho esto, espero que hayáis disfrutado del vídeo, nos vemos en el próximo.